you just heard a really important history lesson from Chris about where we've been with Atlas. And then you just heard two different things, and I think it can be easy to mistake them. So I want to disambiguate them for a second. There is there is the idea that in the history up to this point, we have a platform. Many of you are using it to some capacity for your research. And we are at a crossroads where it necessitates that we create a new version to be able to facilitate support of active developed packages that we're building on, which means that the current Atlas needs to reach end of life. And we have two concurrent pathways that are going on. One is to simplify to this 3.x series that Chris was talking about, where we're basically going to try to clear up and simplify what we're doing. And that's going to be an issue of us prioritizing where the work is. The second is for us to take the opportunity now that we're a decade in to fundamentally reimagine what Atlas could be. And that's what you just heard from Peter. The survey that Craig just put in the chat, that is specifically for those of you who would like to engage in the user interviews to think about Atlas 4.0 and to engage with the in that process. We'd love to hear your input and feedback, and that's an important thing. But in addition to that, what Chris is about to walk through is what we actually critically need from you all right now. And so we're going to be asking you to do surveys every single week for the next month. And this input is going to directly define the trajectory of where we go with Atlas 3.x in terms of the current resource. I want to, before you jump back in, Chris, I want to commend you and Senna and Alexi and the entire Atlas team. I don't think people can truly appreciate. We have developed this packet, this software tool that many of our community, hundreds of people, are actively using, and it's developed by a remarkably small number of developers who have been committed and have made important contributions to this package. But just to be very clear, like as an open source community, you always run into the challenge that at some point you realize that your user base far outstrips your developer resources. And so we're actually at a critical impasse right now where we do have tremendous leadership by Chris and the team to develop Atlas and to move it forward, but we can't continue to maintain and support this thing that keeps growing like a monster and has now gone from dozens to hundreds to maybe even thousands of people concurrently using it without us taking a purposeful pause and taking a reflection on where do we go from now. So we are actively seeking way more people to get involved in the journey of Atlas. And that requires that we need you guys to participate as users in these surveys that Chris is going to go through. So for those of you who've been like passively on the side, maybe watching, maybe using Atlas, but not engaged in the Atlas team, this is really an opportunity for you to give back and contribute to the community. And your input that you're going to give Chris and the team right now is going to 100% directly shape the trajectory of where we go, because we know we can't keep going the path we've been going, which is why it's really critical and why we are going to be spending the next month together focused on this together, because we know that this is a platform that's central to our community, but it's something that to a large extent, I'd say, has been kind of probably underappreciated in terms of the work that goes into it and not as much input from the community that we need. So sorry, Chris, I just want to provide that context as you go through this, because I think it's really important that all of you who are on and for those that are listening to the recording when we're done, that really we need your input. This isn't just a nice to have kind of a thing. It's kind of really essential to the future of whether or not we're going to continue to develop and support Atlas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would. I do recognize there is definitely going to be some confusion when I say survey, and Peter was talking about his survey. I will focus on what I'm going to be talking about now is the current functionality survey of Atlas, whereas the 4.0 is more about thinking about the future, about how people are working and how they would like to work, etc. We are trying to take stock of what the current functionality is, what is being frequently used, and what is most important to people using the tool. So all the surveys will be revolving around that theme, except for the first one, which has a little bit of an like tell us about yourself. So that's this. So I'll just go into that first. We're going to be asking you about which version of Atlas you're using, how frequently you use it in general, how your interactions are performed with the community, either through forums or GitHub. And the first survey will talk about high level, just the left nav, going through each section and asking generally about how important that section is to your work and how frequently you're using it. I will be posting to the Odyssey forums the link to the survey, but it's also in this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to click on that first link. So after we get some kind of who are you, we are going to then, when we ask you about the features, this is the nature of the how frequently to use it and how important is it. So I just want to kind of dig into that, because that is going to be a repeated question when we get into the later series of surveys about searching, vocabulary searching, and data source reports, and cohort editors, and included source codes, that kind of stuff. We're going to ask you these questions. We're going to ask you how frequently to use the feature in question. There's going to be a range from like, I did not know of, or I never used it, you rarely use it, like maybe you rarely use it, less than 20% of the time in Atlas you'll be using that feature. Sometimes you'll use it, which is like the middle ground kind of thing. And the third one is I'm practically all the time using this feature when I go into Atlas. And then the second question relates to the importance. And when we say importance, we mean, is the feature that you're doing, is it something that you don't care about, or it's not significant to your work? It has a slight importance, meaning that you know it's there, you've looked at it sometimes, but you don't need to look at it. It's not part of the workflow of your work. Moderately important means you incorporate this feature into your daily process, and you usually use it. And the last one is extremely important, is to say this is a critical function to your work. Like, this is something that you can't do your work without. You'll notice that there are, in both of these cases, 4, not 5 options. One of the feedback and suggestions was to include a 5th option, which is sort of like middle of the road. The reason why I am opting to design the survey with 4 options is I would like you guys to pick a side. The first 2 are sort of like the lower priority, and the latter 2 are the upper priority. So if you find yourself in the middle, I would really like you to pick a side of it's less or more kind of decision on these surveys. So that's just one important consideration on that. If you wonder, how do I say neutral? I don't want you guys to be neutral. I want you guys to either say it's not that important or more important than not. Okay. That's it. That is this end of our talk. I'm certainly happy to take any open questions. I think we made it in good time. I will, again, be posting all this information to the forum so you guys can progress this throughout the week. And then next week, we'll be introducing the next survey, where I will do a walkthrough of what the elements of the next survey are. So it's going to be sort of a demo, but not really a tutorial, but just a walkthrough of what's going to be involved. And we can also review what the responses were up to this point as of next week.
Chris, since we've got time, can I suggest that you actually open up the survey and
Sure thing.
Particularly the let's go through the questions, but particularly the table of the left side dabs, just so that we can show that and make sure that everybody's clear about what we're really asking for on that.
And to add the survey, I just put the survey on the chat so people can click on it right now.
First question, we'll just ask if you are or not a user of Atlas. We want to just get responses from people who are using Atlas. So if you say no, it'll take you to the end, but say yes here. We're going to first ask you how it's deployed in your environment. Either you have a local installation, you use it through the Odyssey hosted, like demo or one of the Odyssey hosted, or you happen to be accessing a shared instance through an external institution. So pick what best fits your current situation. We are going to check to ask you what version of Atlas you're currently using. To find that information, you'll go into your Atlas, you'll go right to the home page, and right underneath the Getting Started buttons, you'll see a release notes title and a version of what version you're using. That should be across all the different versions of Atlas. So please choose from the dropdown. Either you're in the 1.0 space, so just pick that, or specifically which version of the 2.0 series are you using. Okay, next we're going to ask how often you are using Atlas, and this is going to go to daily, weekly, monthly, sometimes a year, and maybe you haven't used it in a long time. So we have these options that you will choose. All right, curious about how long you've been an Atlas user, from less than a year, 1 to 3 years, or more than 3 years. And then we asked that importance question about how important is Atlas in general to your work. How an importance meaning how necessary it is to perform your duties. So not important, slightly, moderately, extremely are your choices. So just give one that feels best. We ask about how you've collaborated with Atlas. So these are, you don't have to choose any if you've done none of the above, but you can choose multiple selections here. It's forums, workgroup calls, team meetings, Teams channel. You've reported issues on GitHub, you've requested a new feature on GitHub, or you performed code reviews on GitHub. So some GitHub stuff, some team stuff, some forum stuff. Aha. Let me answer. Whatever. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to submit these answers. Okay. One question. Okay. All right. Now, the next section is going to be sort of like the general Atlas survey about each nav. So in this image, I'm showing you the left nav, and I'm giving you basically a short description of what you're doing. Data source is about database characterization. Searching is about searching the vocabulary, creating concept sets, cohort definitions, characterization, et cetera, et cetera. We go down the list, and we ask the 2 questions. For each of these elements, how frequently do you use them? And I give you the ratings of what that means as far as rarely, frequently, whatever. So you'll give this list and you'll quickly just select down which ones you're really using and which ones you kind of never use. And then the next question is the same choices, but about importance. So not the same choices, but the same navs, but now we're talking about the importance from not important to extremely important. Each nav, go ahead and choose how you rate those functions. And I'm going to have to click so I can go next. I'm pretty sure this is going to be the last question though. And then there's some finalization stuff.
I think before you switch off of this screen, Chris, maybe if you go up to that top part, let's take time to make sure everybody understands what those left navs are, because that's kind of really central to this survey.
Yes. So I did talk about database characterization in data sources. That gives you the different domain level reports, your dashboard, your observation period, statistics, things like that. You use the search nav to search for vocabulary terms. That'll give you that search results and allow you to see what related concepts there are. The concept hierarchy, drill down reports are all found under searching. Concept sets is where you go when you want to create your code list using concept set expressions, or you want to view included concepts, included source codes. You can do other things by looking at the common evidence model, create negative controls from that. Cohort definitions is where we are creating our populations from. So using cohort criteria and generating some of the cohort reporting there, creating samples. Characterization is where from your cohort definitions, you can characterize them by selecting feature extraction like conditions in the last year or last short-term conditions, long-term conditions, also all the other domains, procedures, drugs, and you get your reports on that. Cohort pathways is where I showed you that, where you are creating the event cohort. Using event cohorts, you can see the sequence of events that happen during a start and end date of a cohort, a target cohort that you choose. Instance will create calculations of instance rates of outcomes among target populations. Patient profile viewer is found under the profile nav. The estimation allows you to create estimation packages, old obsolete packages, but packages nonetheless using what's called skeletons. So estimation prediction work in the same way. I didn't mention this in my demo because I didn't have it hooked up, but as of 2.4, there was the ability to, and there still is the ability, if you have Arachne execution engine configured, you can actually submit these execution packages to a asynchronous process R session that is running and can run that process. So that is happening in estimation and prediction. Reusables is where you go to create those reusable criteria pieces of logic that can be used in either criteria features or cohort definitions. The jobs nav lets you basically just pull up the list of all the jobs that have been run in the system, background jobs such as characterization analyses, cohort generations, etc. Configuration is where you can go to look at what data sources are set up in your instance and also manage tags and clear caches, create new data sources, things like that. Mostly administrative, that you have to have administrative permissions in Web API to do, but that's what's under configuration. And then there's a feedback form that you click this, gives you a text box, and it'll just send an email off to our our maintainer email list for any feedback that you have. How's that, Patrick? Is there anything that I should go into more detail?
No, I appreciate you going through that, Chris. I mean, I think I don't want to lead the witness too much in terms of your survey responses, but I'll just provide like high-level summary. What you've just seen is over the last decade, this package has grown from being a small amount of limited features to a very large collection of features and capabilities. And I'd say, like, frankly, like, it's kind of insane that we have a package that is morphed into this giant monster with all this stuff. And so it's super important that we get your feedback, because I would assert kind of pretty strongly that, like, we can't just keep going by just keep throwing more and more features and more capabilities onto a tool. Even in this case where Chris is showing you a screenshot, it's like we started with a left nav that had like 4 buttons, and we're now at a left nav, we're going to run out of space on the screen. That's a good indicator that like the direction that we're going probably isn't where we need to be as a community. But we need to hear from you. Like, if I were to assert very strongly, like, we can't support all of these functions anymore, then we would need to be thinking about things like, which functions are we not going to use? Or which ones are we going to delete off this left-hand side as an extreme position to take? And I don't feel that I'm not well equipped to make those decisions, but I also don't think that the Atlas development team is well positioned to make those decisions. I think it really needs to come from the real users within our community to help prioritize these things. That's why we're really looking to you all as to provide us this critical input so that we can make decisions about where do we prioritize our efforts and what do we actually take away, given that now that we've developed it, we've learned that it's not actually useful for the community.
And I'd also like to add to this, thinking in terms of how 2.x will bridge into 3.x into 4.x. We will hopefully have the developers that are working on simplifying and optimizing during our 3.0 box. They'll be able to understand how these features were built. And there's so much lessons learned from going through the last 8 years of development that in going into 4.x, I think it will be very important to have those lessons learned on hand, not just completely blank slate, like no memory of the past. Let's take these learnings and understanding from the community. Like, we can find out right now, okay, everybody, what has proven to be the most impactful, most important, most frequently used functions, like we can capitalize on that. The things that aren't so leveraged, we can ask the questions, why not? And that's something that we can bring into like this whole 4.0 evolution that we're going to be talking about post 3.x.